Postscript: The Truth Behind the Declaration of Independence, 1776. Introduction. Chapter 1. What you were never told about 1776. When most people think of July 4th, they picture fireworks, flags, and freedom. But behind the celebration is a story far more complex. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just a bold political statement, it was a dangerous, revolutionary act that could have cost the signers their lives. It was the result of years of escalating tensions, failed compromises, secret debates, and personal sacrifices. This video is not about what you read in your school textbook. It's about what they didn't tell you, the backroom decisions, the political fears, the parts of the Declaration that were cut out, and why. Today, we peel back the patriotic layers and explore the real story behind one of the most powerful documents in American history. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear may change how you think about American independence forever. Chapter 2. The real reason behind the Declaration. Ask any student why America declared independence, and you'll usually hear one word: taxes. But taxation was just the tip of the iceberg. The real issues ran deeper: control, identity, survival. Britain was enforcing laws that severely restricted colonial trade. The Stamp Act and Townshend Acts weren't just financial burdens. They were seen as signs that the colonies had lost control over their own destinies. Colonists were forced to quarter British soldiers in their homes. Courts favored the crown. Even peaceful protests, like the Boston Tea Party, were met with harsh retaliation. When the colonists sent the Olive Branch Petition to King George III in 1775, they hoped for peace. Instead, they got silence. It was clear Britain saw them as rebellious children, not as equal citizens. And so, independence wasn't just a choice. It became a necessity. For the Founding Fathers, declaring independence was the only way to survive as a free people. Chapter 3. The Founders were not all united. It's easy to imagine the Founding Fathers gathered around a table, all nodding in agreement. But the truth? They were deeply divided. Many feared war. Some still hoped for reconciliation with Britain. The Second Continental Congress was a battlefield of ideas. John Dickinson, a respected delegate from Pennsylvania, argued fiercely against independence. He believed diplomacy could still work. Meanwhile, John Adams, fiery and passionate, pushed hard for a clean break. There were heated debates, emotional speeches, and even threats to walk out. It took months of persuasion, political maneuvering, and compromise to get all 13 colonies to agree. New York abstained from the vote at first. Some delegates signed reluctantly. Others, like Dickinson, never signed at all. The road to unity was rocky and fragile. And yet, in the end, they found enough common ground to make history. Chapter 4. The Secret Editing of Jefferson's Draft. Thomas Jefferson was just 33 years old when he was asked to draft the Declaration. He poured his heart and intellect into every line. But what the world reads today isn't exactly what Jefferson wrote. Over 80 edits were made by Congress. The most controversial? A powerful condemnation of slavery. Jefferson blamed King George III for allowing the transatlantic slave trade, calling it a cruel war against human nature. But Southern delegates were outraged. They demanded it be removed. Slavery, after all, was the backbone of their economies. And so, those words were cut, erased from history. Other edits toned down Jefferson's fiery language. Some passages were rewritten for clarity or diplomacy. What remained was still bold and beautiful. But it was also sanitized, a compromise between truth and politics. Jefferson was devastated. He later wrote about his disappointment. But he knew compromise was the cost of unity. Chapter 5. Signers risked more than we realize. Often celebrate the Founding Fathers as heroes, but we forget the price they paid. Signing the Declaration of Independence was an act of treason. If caught by the British, they would be hanged. Many of them knew this and signed anyway. Some lost their homes, which were burned to the ground. Others had their families harassed or kidnapped. Thomas Nelson Jr. ordered cannons to fire on his own house when it was occupied by British troops. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately." These men were not just making speeches. They were making enemies. Their wealth, safety, and futures were all at risk. And yet, they chose to put principle over privilege. They believed that liberty was worth any cost, even their lives. Chapter 6. July 4th wasn't the real Independence Day. Ironically, July 4th wasn't even the day America decided to break from Britain. That vote happened on July 2, 1776. John Adams was so convinced July 2nd would be the holiday that he wrote to his wife, saying future generations would celebrate it with parades and fireworks. But the final version of the Declaration wasn't adopted until July 4th. And the signing? That didn't happen all at once. Most delegates didn't sign the document until August 2nd. Some weren't even present when the vote took place. So why July 4th? That's the date printed on the first published copies. It became a symbol, a date people could rally around. But in truth, American independence was a process, not a moment. And like many parts of history, the story is more complicated than it first appears. Chapter 7. Women and African Americans were left out. All men are created equal. Powerful words. But in 1776, they didn't apply to everyone. Women were not included. Enslaved African Americans were excluded entirely. Native American tribes were described as merciless savages in the text. While the Declaration claimed to speak for all, it was written by wealthy, landowning white men. Abigail Adams famously wrote to her husband John, "Remember the ladies." But her plea went unanswered. It would take another century for women to gain the right to vote. And for African Americans, the journey toward equality would involve a bloody civil war, civil rights movements, and generations of struggle. The Declaration laid the foundation. But it was only the beginning of the fight for true equality. Chapter 8. Propaganda, or principle. Was the Declaration of Independence truly about freedom, or was it political theater? The answer is both. The founders knew that declaring independence wasn't just for Britain. It was also for France and Spain, whose support would be crucial in the coming war. The Declaration painted the colonies as victims of tyranny, noble underdogs fighting for their rights. It was carefully worded to inspire, to persuade, and to unite. The soaring ideals of liberty and equality made the document resonate. But behind the rhetoric were strategic goals: rallying colonists, winning allies, and legitimizing the rebellion. In that sense, the Declaration was as much a piece of propaganda as it was a moral statement. And yet, those carefully chosen words would inspire revolutions far beyond America's borders. Chapter 9. What happened to the original copy? The original Declaration of Independence was handwritten on parchment by Timothy Matlack, a clerk. It was signed by 56 men, then rolled up and transported during the war. It survived chaos, fire, and time. During the War of 1812, it was hidden in Virginia. In the 20th century, it was moved to Fort Knox for protection during World War II. Today, it rests in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., behind bulletproof glass. But it has faded, the ink now barely visible. Light, moisture, and time have taken their toll. Still, people from around the world come to see it. Because even though the words may fade, the power of the document remains. It's more than parchment. It's a promise. Chapter 10. Why it still matters today more than 2 centuries later. The Declaration of Independence continues to shape the American identity. Its principles have been echoed in movements for civil rights, women's rights, and global democracy. Martin Luther King Jr. quoted it in his "I Have a Dream" speech. Protesters of all kinds hold it up as a reminder of unfulfilled promises. It remains a benchmark against which progress is measured. But it also reminds us that democracy is not perfect and never was. It's a work in progress. The men who wrote the Declaration were flawed. Their vision was incomplete, but they planted the seed of liberty. And it's up to each generation to help it grow. That's the real truth behind the Declaration of Independence. Not just what it said in 1776, but what it continues to mean today.